Fitness Pro Mentor community, welcome to another episode. I'm extremely excited because this is the second time I'm starting this because I accidentally had his microphone muted, and that's a shame because this gentleman right here, Roland Pankewich, I am extremely excited to have. I said his name right.
You did. Congratulations.
Twice.
Really
hard.
Just we didn't hear it the first time.
Yeah, no, I definitely foobarred it before, but now we're good. And I'm really excited because for all of you trainers here, Roland is someone I've known for way too long in a great way. And he has been there really from the beginning of a lot of the training career stuff that I was involved with, the resistance training specialist program with Peter. And he's got a really interesting story. And I'm really excited for all of you to get to check this out because Roland started off as a scientific trainer like you. He's got a bit of a story of how he got into that world and his mission there. And then from there, went on and did some really incredible stuff. But Roland, how you doing today?
Fantastic, my friend. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I don't like this because on these cameras, your skin is making me look even more pale.
Well, I was more tanned, but being out of the jungle for a month and a half, it kind of starts to dissipate a little bit.
And that's part of the thing we're going to talk about today is why was he in the jungle and why is he a successful entrepreneur? Cool,
Fair
man.
enough.
Well, how do you feel about just jumping right into this and
Let's
telling
do
a
it.
little bit of your story?
So I guess I'll get into a storytelling mode here. So
Who are you?
once upon a time, no, not that serious. I would say that if this audience has been the crew that has been wanting more from their career, they investigate things that they want to explore and utilize with clientele. I was the same way in the exercise world. I started with athletic training. It's like, I'm just memorizing stuff. Wanted to get into a little bit more, started understanding that there's some nuance to exercise. There's these things called muscles, and I didn't know what they were. And maybe there's a little bit of this thing we call force in physics and exercise. So it led me to the resistance training specialist program with our late mentor, Peter, as you mentioned. And it was an incredible thing because it opened up my world to critical thinking. Without RTS and without Tom Purvis, I would not be the person that I am today as a professional when it comes to the concept of question everything. Like those original RTS manuals where the word control was just written like 82 times in block letters.
Right.
It's those little things, and you see what Tom was trying to get you to do. It was like, use your mind, use your critical thinking process. So it helped me excel when I went back to the exercise world in a gym setting, and it made me want to do something greater than just work in a facility. I tried to start a gym in the city of Toronto with a couple guys. Fate had another plan, didn't work out. So I put all my eggs in that basket, and it didn't work out. So I had to scramble. And as a result, I left the exercise industry for a while, and I took a job selling photocopiers for Xerox on
I didn't know that.
I never think I told you that. I was working on straight commission sales, selling a photocopier. And no one's passionate about selling photocopiers. So if you can sell a photocopier, you have learned to communicate with humans decently well.
That's great. Actually.
Yeah, that was the best and the worst experience of my life simultaneously.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you can, like you said, if you can sell a photocopier, you can sell anything that you're
Yes.
excited about.
Well, it teaches you a lot about yourself, right? Because in this industry, you kind of have to be a self-starter if you want to do something beyond the norm.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with working in a facility if that's what you love to do, but that's not me. It's not the person that I am. So while I was doing that, my girlfriend then at the time said, well, why don't you become a nutritionist? Like, people ask you nutrition questions all the time. Because when I was doing competitive sports, I was reading everything I could. How can I recover faster? How can I, eat to enhance my performance? So I went to a school in Toronto called the Institute of Holistic Nutrition. It was a very serendipitous thing where, in usual Roland style, I showed up like an hour before the event. The open house ended. I met all these people that one was the owner of the school, one was the coordinator. And I just grabbed all the documentation, and I didn't even need to read it. I'm like, this is right. I went to that school, and immediately I was like, I'm home. Like, I was applying the RTS-style critical thinking to understanding the human body. So I was seeing things that other people weren't because I was looking at them in a different way. And when I was a student, the owner of the school, she's an incredibly positive, beautiful woman. Her name's Elizabeth. She's like, "Hon, come here," and call me in the hallway. She's like, "I know what courses you're teaching for me when you graduate." And I went, huh? I'm not a good scholastic student. I'm very intuitive, seat of the pants feel. So I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. But I'm not logical in that way. And lo and behold, she kept her word. I graduated, and she's like, all right, you're teaching preventative healthcare. And I'm like, I don't know how to be a teacher. So I had to figure out how to teach. So that was just me memorizing all the different conditions and all the suggestions and the nutrients and all these things to then give that perspective and understanding to the students. Another course. I ended up teaching 4 courses. And then I had to leave teaching because greater opportunities kind of called, where I started traveling the world, doing some mentorship with a physician, started working in Southeast Asia for a while, doing conferences in Europe. Got introduced to some amazing industry professionals. Benjamin Pekulski, who you may know, BPAC, was an incredible friend and mentor of mine, helped open up some great opportunities in his network, did some work with him and some people that he introduced me to. And that kind of gave me the in with, you know, a certain crowd of people, a reputation. And since then, I've just been kind of relentlessly pursuing becoming an evolving professional. I don't think there's an end point to that, but it's where I am today, and I get to do some pretty fun stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, Roland is definitely working with some very high-level, incredible people that we're going to maintain anonymity for
various
sake.
Mr. Smiths and
Various
Mr. Johnsons and such.
Mr. Smith that you know, which makes this super cool and a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
I can say I work with either high-level executive clients or I work with pro athletes.
Cool.
And exclusively those two crowds of people, in addition to doing some consulting for companies.
So I would love to talk about how your business even got to that point. But I think that you said something at the beginning. There was two things that really stand out. And one was, I mean, you talked about, and I don't want to make this about RTS or Tom Purvis per se, but you talked about how that program helped to develop your thought process. And you invested a lot of energy into that program. I know, like I did.
Yes.
You were there and you committed, you were studying, you had every book. I remember a notebook you had and you had everything wrote out in your words. And you were like, I would say, in my opinion, very scholastic from what I saw in the doses when I was getting to know you. And I don't know if I want to say it's a testament, like definitely what Tom taught from an academic thought process sense is brilliant. One thing I think that you did really, really well though, is you just you were a learner. Like forgetting about RTS, even with cars, like before RTS, you get into something.
Yeah, I get all the way into it.
And you go all the way in. And I'm just wondering, do you think that going all the way in on something, no matter what it is, like if someone here is passionate about drums or they're passionate about fabric, I don't care what it is. Do you think there is an academic exercise that someone can do where they just dive in as deep as they can go to see where it goes, and that might transfer to other parts of their life?
Yes and no. I think the perspective of understanding, the deeper you go down something, you go into like a deep rabbit hole, it can actually be an impedance to you being able to use that practically. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I started focusing on the gastrointestinal system as my specialty. So I started reading anything and everything because for me, I want to investigate it all and figure out what am I going to do with it.
Yeah.
And to your point, investigating things deeply is important. Doing it in your style, not to emulate someone else's style, is always in your best interest because you can then purpose it in how you want to use it.
Yeah.
But if you go too deep in a rabbit hole, you may figure out information that may be interesting, possibly valuable, that may be useless. So if we use the gut for an example, I was looking at these different mechanisms of how leaky gut works. So there's these genetic mechanisms that you can measure. There are different proteins that can be implicated in processes, but we can't take that really rabbit hole deep information and make an action item out of that that's practical and applicable to someone. So it's like, okay, cool, I have this knowledge, but I can do nothing about it strategically. I'm still stuck with my tools of what the industry or what science has advanced towards with the person in front of me.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you can look at an MRI of someone's joint, but you can't definitively do something to bias that in an exercise as detailed as an MRI can give you a picture of someone's joint. So it might actually be a challenge for you because if you get stuck on that little thing, you're missing that the person came in for a workout and they want to enjoy themselves and they don't want to hyper focus on the one thing that's actually going to make them worse rather than better.
I mean, this is a sidestep to your direction, but I think that so many trainers make this mistake at all because they get excited about RTS or holistic nutrition.
Yes.
And they get really excited and they go, like I know I did this when I was studying more about post-activation. Mr. McMillan pushed me that direction. And I went all in. I'm like, okay, there's this thing called central and peripheral fatigue, central fatigue, nervous system. I need to learn everything about the nervous system. And I went all in on learning a bunch of stuff that wasn't pragmatic in my decision-making in any way. I just had all this information that was like, this is great, but this and this and this and this took me a long time to learn and doesn't change my day-to-day.
Doesn't. If anything, it takes you away because you're focusing less energy on the human aspect or the client aspect or the relationship aspect of managing things, which I would love to get into from a business context later of why that's so important, not just content focus or expertise focus. I think perspective is the most important thing. What I mean by that is knowing what to look at, knowing how to look at something, knowing why it's there, knowing when it's appropriate, but also knowing when it's just a nice piece of information for the sake of knowing something. And it may make you sound really smart at a dinner party. It may make you feel really good because you're doing the things that no one else is doing. But it's not the be-all and end-all of everyone needing to dive so deep in that they hit the bottom of the rabbit hole to go, all right, I'm done. Because what do you do next?
Well, and so you actually said, well, we should talk about this in the future. I think this is a great point to talk about, and talking about it in the context of business, in that the direction you have gone with everything that you've studied, which I'm embarrassed to say I don't understand the full depth of it, and how should I, because you've spent so much time with these physicians. But you are working with the echelon of people in their careers, whether they're sport-specific athletes or executives, and they're investing really quite a lot into you. And you're going deep down worlds of academia that these people haven't heard about. They don't understand everything that you're saying. And how dare they? I mean, I know a little bit about what you're saying, and I still don't get it. And these people aren't even in that world. And you're so far that direction. And so you have this juxtaposition between like, well, how do you communicate, speak client, or indulge them with all the academic stuff? And that's a really delicate balance that you obviously have, I don't want to say mastered, but you've done a great job with, because they keep referring other people.
Analogies and metaphors are very powerful tools. Most people don't want to know all of the shiny objects under the surface. That is more, I find, of an ego play for me to want them to know, because it makes me feel like more of a professional when I feel like I've given them this really well thought out scientific infallible explanation. The average person wants to know what to do, what is it going to do for them, and when are they going to feel it, right? Yeah. Because if you're working with someone who's on the absolute fringe, like a captain of a hockey team, his entire life is about his game, his sport, his profession at the same time, and then when he's not doing that, it's his family or his free time. He doesn't want to know that certain species of bacteria create inflammatory cytokines that then can promote immune activation and T-cell aggravation and leaky gut. They don't want to know that stuff. So you realize, you go super deep, you're like, oh, I'm on a lonely island here. And it's going to give me greater perspective in my decision making, but it's not going to give me better client experience or happier clients if I start to bore them with things that they never asked me to teach them.
100%.
That's the important part, is like that, think like a professional and then bring it up to the level of understanding. And maybe hopefully they want to go down a little bit deeper. They might start asking you questions, but you realize that the vast majority of people are going to want to go deep on the topics that they're interested in. And it always bumps into like, it may start with health, but it goes somewhere else into terms of life. And it really becomes then about, yes, I have this skill set of being a professional, but I have to actually dedicate more energy and time to managing the person and the relationship. And I realized this the other day when I was actually communicating this to someone. The genius of being successful in that is taking the plan and then figuring out what are the facilitating aspects to the execution so it becomes the new reality for the person you're working with.
So it kind of lines up with their pains, their dream outcome, really the reason why they're hiring you.
And them following all the suggestions so that you fit into their life. It's not an idealistic, this is what you have to do now. Because they'll just throw that out. If it doesn't work with them, this is at the high level, right? They're just not going to do it. So you're going to have no success. But you have to figure out what is it they want, take that and connect it to what your expertise of knowledge is, and then package it in a way that there's no opportunities for failure in execution.
Well, and you said like at the high level, and that's why I want to talk about this, is because I think anyone that's listening to this, any personal trainer, any fitness professional, I think if you're working with the captain of a hockey team, an executive of a company, or someone that has a problem and they're hiring a trainer like you that costs $150 an hour or whatever it is, it is the same service. It's the same service delivery. Like whatever academics you have backing it, you have to find a way to convey advanced pieces of information. Don't touch that. Advanced pieces of information so they understand it and it actually influences their life. I got a guy that was with me just yesterday, a client of mine for years, and he owns $1 billion gigantic company. Like, doesn't have time for anything, but he makes time to come here. And when he's got time to come here, I have a couple, if I say, hey, we're going to do this, I have to be able to like break it down and have him understand it in like 3 sentences if I'm lucky to have that much time of his brain space. Yeah. And if I don't get it in 3 sentences, he's out. He doesn't care about motor learning. And most of your clients, I'm sure, like you said, that depth that you're going to, they probably don't care a lot about the specifics, the science of it, but they want to know how it's going to change their life.
And in some ways, if you get them too hung up on that, it actually creates a stress in their existences. I have one guy that I was working with, or I'm going to start to work with rather. I have had a few conversations with him. So he had a functional medicine doctor come into the team that he plays with last year, and they did a food sensitivity screening on him. So He comes into her office and he's like, so you can't eat blah, 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 blah now. Those are the only things he ate. So what happened to him? Middle of the season, he's having a great season. He starts freaking out. He can't eat all the things he eats, so he starts to eat nothing. And what happens? His performance on the ice tanks. He's stressed. He doesn't know what to do. And that's because someone's like, I have all this information. Here's why you can't eat these foods, because they cause inflammation in your body. Sure, there's a little bit of inflammation, but guess what? His entire season is now becoming compromised because his performance is going down drastically because he's got no food in his system.
Right.
So you need to know when the shiny new objects become distractions or problems. And yeah, it's knowing how to play to your audience. If you want to deal with like the gentleman like you just mentioned, those people have very important existences in their own minds. It's true. And they don't allow things to occupy their minds or their attention spans that don't serve them in some higher order. And they have no time for stuff that stresses them out.
So I got a question for you, and this is actually jumping ahead because most of you don't even know what Roland does yet, really.
This is
We
true.
still want to talk about that.
This is true.
But so I was at the beginning of opening this gym. I think you know I've got some hockey family connections, and I was busy. I was really working hard to get deep into the NHL world, and I was volunteering at a few events. Went to one of the sports teams in the U.S. It was awesome. It was really, really cool. But it was like there was two things that was really frustrating. One, the politics. I hated it. Like I literally, it was the most brutal part, and I knew people, and I was still sword dancing to flex, so to speak. You know what I mean? I don't mean that literally, but like if you don't stand out or like have something remarkable to say very fast, you're kind of out, or you don't line up.
If you stand up too much and you're not one of the crew, you're out because you're not welcome.
And then the second thing I struggle with, which I imagine you do, was that the way I was thinking about everything that I was doing was such a juxtaposition to the entire training staff there that, like, although they had very high level master performance coaches and stuff like that, they still thought of exercise and fitness in a very traditional way. And so this kind of combination, I was wondering, like for you, if you have a sports team and you have what they are doing for common knowledge as far as functional medicine, nutrition, whatever it is they're doing, how does that affect their performance? And do you think that some small, subtle shifts in just how people think about things could make a really, really big change? Or do you think they need a really, really big push to go all the way in with the stuff that you're doing?
I think there's a large majority of the same behaviors and insights that will affect all humans positively. Some basic fundamental things, like if you get into functional fancy lab testing and you're not drinking good quality water, for example, or if you're eating a certain kind of food that you know is problematic, but it's just what's available in the league, why would you go all the way to advanced functional medicine testing and revamp the whole thing?
Right.
Your point is true. There is a culture and there is a camaraderie around the kinds of people that traditionally work in these organizations. I've had a few challenges with that, but I try to deal with the individual on the individual's terms, and if need be, I'll connect with whoever's important to them. But the strategy that's worked well for me is I have gotten to know personally certain people in positions of authority and power in those organizations who are more open-minded. And it's that open-mindedness that probably brings their subconscious mind to go, oh, this guy I'm working with is having this problem, I'm going to connect him with Roland. Or I'll ask Roland a question, right? So, that's led me to having discussions with certain teams about bringing in recovery modalities. And it's just like, I'm not getting paid for that. But for me, it's a great opportunity to build a relationship. You build a bridge.
Right,
and,
right.
You catch more flies with honey than vinegar. So I try to be open-minded to saying, like, if you want to know what I do, cool. If you don't, you're happy in your world, cool. Let's just agree that there's certain parameters which we may find synergy or unity on. There's certain that we don't. And just always be respectful about it.
So, Roland, what do you do?
Well, I've been known to fight crime.
Oh, yes.
I play a mean ukulele. No, so let's be serious.
You were the Pankewich panda, that superhero. I knew you were.
There we go.
There you go.
You fit my last name in an analogy, a metaphor? What would you call that?
A superhero name.
Superhero, there, even better.
There you go.
Man, look, I did amount to something, Mom. So what I do is I call myself an athletic health specialist or a personal health specialist. The difference is when I work with athletes, I have a certain approach when it comes to working in different levels. Like level 1 would be the basics of getting diet, lifestyle, supplementation, circadian rhythm, recovery, all those things right. That's basic stuff where I talked about 90% of humans benefit from generally the same kind of information, because as much as we're all different, we're all the same. Level 2 gets up to working with personalization, so doing some individual lab testing, creating a methodology of sampling data on athletes to know what to do with them in their off season, what to do in season, and how I can track those metrics to make sure that things are staying in the right pattern of what I expect.
Gotcha.
You know, an example would be every 6 months we do a comprehensive blood panel, check hormones, check inflammatory markers, do some urine analysis to look at metabolic profile, do some stool analysis to see what's going on in the gut, maybe do some nutritional testing to see if I need to give them anything very specific. And then I have to jam all that in with their travel schedules, the changes in time zones, home games, away games, when they're with their families, food on the road. That's quite a challenge. And then when it comes to working with the executives, I do what I call techno shamanism, which I know you wanted to throw in the name here.
I thought it was clever marketing.
It is pretty
Techno-shaman.
cool, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out how I can understand what their physiology is trying to tell me. So I'll do the same level of testing with them, because people are not numbers on paper. A lab test is a snapshot of a moment in time, and you can maybe infer 30 to 90 days back on a blood test to say, oh, well, this has probably been consistent over this period of time. And then things like organic acid testing with the urine or stool testing, that's that day. So I know where the limitations are. So I like to also use things like heart rate variability testing or understanding what their nervous system is trying to do. So I get a sense of what the pattern of the body is really trying to manage. And most people nowadays, their nervous systems will tell you everything. If their heart rate variability is low, they're incredibly stressed out. So it gives me insights as to, well, how are they going to digest their food? How are they going to have tolerance for intense exercise? What's their sleep going to be like? What is their lifestyle like? And then I have to take all of that and then personalize it to the who I'm dealing with. Because what they like is what they like. What they don't like is what they don't like. So if I give them this idealistic plan and they go, yeah, I don't want to do this. I'm like, oh, great. This is the effective use of my time and your money. So that's kind of what I do. It's something that I've evolved naturally over the last few years. I don't know that it's done by anyone else, but it's like a very premium level, fully comprehensive health coaching program.
So when you say, like, as far as, now I'm just wondering actually, before I even go to like technical stuff.
I'm not available for you to hire me, no.
I would want to bet that if I had to choose between high-level professional athletes and executives, the executives are probably easier to have change because most of them have far more autonomy of their environment and have resources and are in one spot longer that they can kind of put things around them in place versus hockey players where they are everywhere all the time or whatever other sport it may be. We talked about hockey already.
A little basketball, a little bit of football.
Would you say that's fair or am I off base there?
It's both correct and incorrect in the sense that the reason that the hockey players are harder is because of their lives and their schedule variance, but they're better at following orders.
Yeah.
Because they're more militant-like and they've been used to a coach telling them what to do. And if they believe it and they're emotionally behind that belief, they'll implement. And once they feel the difference, they're good. Right. With an executive, their lives are more stressful. And put it this way, if you're in charge of a company that's worth a few $100 million, you're probably not very good at being told what to do. So there's a little bit of that like practical psychology and relationship management side of things to where, you know, I don't have a degree in psychology. I'm not a psychotherapist, but you get to learn and you know this, working with people for decades more, you get to understand the patterns of behaviors. So you need to learn to fit your desires within their world and their lifestyle. And then you teach them how to evolve their lifestyle to want to facilitate the change to become from realistic more to idealistic. Does that make sense?
Mostly. Of course,
Yeah.
I don't understand the full. But I get it. I know what you mean for sure.
I can say it in a different way. They want to do what they want to do. You need to prove to them that you know what to do versus them.
Yeah.
And then once they feel it, once they're in, they'll be in. Whereas the athletes, you get them right away and they're bought in. You figure out what they need. They'll never question.
Well, there's the binary. I like to think of it this way, and it's not like this, but in the binary decision science world where it's like, you know, all things are leading towards yes or no. And
Yes.
it's not always true, but it's like, is there adherence or is there not?
Yes.
And that adherence or not comes down to the value of where do I position the information you're sharing into my life? Do I value eating the chicken wings at lunchtime more so than how Roland or what I understand is coming from the effect of making this other change, which I'm sure you're excellent at.
Yeah, well, you just got to figure out why they're doing it. Like, and I ask people, like, why are you hiring me? What is it you want to do? Because I use that as a guiding principle to bring back any potential like, deviation off of the course. Like, remember, we're doing this, but I also don't want to have to like convince someone of anything. But if I know why they're doing it, I'll ask a few more questions to figure out what the emotional motivation is. Because, I mean, how many people have you heard say, Brent, I just want to get in better shape? What does that mean? You have to figure out like what's between those words that's being said. Why do you want to get? Yeah, what do you mean? What about better shape are you wanting?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that, because until people know you, they're not as vulnerable as they otherwise hopefully would be. Because if everyone were vulnerable, that you know exactly why they're doing it, be like, look, I want to take my shirt off at the beach and not feel fat. If someone just said that, be like, incredible. I know what your motivation is.
Yep.
Most hockey players are easy. I want to play till I'm 40. Why? My identity is hockey. Great. I want to help you keep that intact. And then when you're ready to retire, maybe we can talk about what that's going to be like. Because I've had a few of those conversations. The executive, the business owner, wants to crush it all the time. They want to have how can I put it? They want to have no weaknesses. They want to have no chinks in the armor. They want to never have a day where their brain's a little slower. They never want to have a day where their energy's a little bit less. So they're wanting to push, push, and push. Them and pro athletes are the same people expressing themselves through different mediums of activity. So with them, it's like, look, this thing called sleep, there's a reason why your body needs that in order for you to feel good. This thing you're doing where you're eating and chewing 6 times at your desk while you're on 3 computer screens, there's a reason why you feel like crap when you eat, because you're not digesting your food. So there's more of that with certain populations, but it's never boring.
Oh, I imagine while you work in a diverse crowd for sure. And it's funny you talk about like, I've tried to talk to clients about just being healthy in general, and I hate talking about it, like food stuff. And it's not because I don't like talking about it, because it's just I'm not in that position to really like, oh, Brandon knows some stuff about this stuff. But in most cases, they're not hiring for me for that. They're hiring me to feel better, not have pain in their body and stuff like that. And most of the time when I talk to people, they don't adhere. And I think it's because that kind of what you're talking about.
People also have to put some skin in the game. Like if you give them some diet advice, it's just words.
Yeah.
And they can choose to go la 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 la, or they can go, oh, I didn't know gluten could cause inflammation in me if I don't digest it well. That's interesting. Tell me more, because I eat a lot of bread. Like it depends on who.
There are small Mickey Mouse things that I've implemented in my life that I've learned through you and Dave. Small, like not on the same level of you guys at all. I am definitely a fat guy compared to you guys when it comes to unhealthiness.
I hear that chair creaking.
I know,
I was
it's
gonna
going
say
down.
something.
But I mean, say that like even the small changes that I've implemented, I noticed like how much more the light's on, like in my brain, and I was less foggy and I slept better, and I was like, holy crap! Like I started going so much more into just being healthier, because the very fact that I could feel like I could be more of a real, genuine person, like I just want to be always who I want to be. And never be like
you're an authentic self.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like when you're tired and like, I'm gonna go have a nap for 3 hours. Like that just feels inefficient and lame to think that you don't need to feel that way.
Well, it's also a sign, because your body shouldn't be that way. Like, and I don't want to get too much into the technical stuff, but I think it's an important perspective for anyone in the health industry to understand that if anyone's dealing with a struggle or a health challenge, and I have this perspective with everyone I work with, I don't always say it to them. The body only knows innately how to express health via cells dividing and renewing themselves and operating effectively. It's everything we do to ourselves, consciously or subconsciously, that negatively impacts that. So all I'm trying to do with someone is work with their body to figure out their unique formula to balance out all those, like your mixers right there, all the levels are at different areas. If I can get them all balanced in a physical, mental, psycho-emotional, spiritual, like across the entire spectrum of the person's going to have a greater chance of being healthier. So they're less likely to develop a disease.
So are you cool? We talk about like your business a little bit.
Yeah, of course.
So, I mean, I think these are fair things to say on Roland's behalf without being sharing too much information. Because you've done an incredible job of learning a really niche skill set and a combination of skill sets. So we have this skill acquisition that's helping Roland differentiate himself, and skills that transfer, like selling the photocopiers, to how those communication skills probably transferred to really everything.
Yeah, if my clients have printer problems, I can really help.
On top of that, Roland has built a business model working with an echelon folk of people because of that skill set. And what I'd love to do, and in a very broad sense, because I know the mechanics of it for each person is very different, would love to know, like, how do you get new clients? How do you bring them on board? And then how do you keep them and be as satellite viewers microscopic as you like?
Sure. So my business model, if someone were to assess its likelihood for success or suggest someone follow it, would probably be suicide mission for most people. So I'll state that first. You may not want to do this the way I've done it. There's a combination of dumb luck, perfect timing, and relentlessness. So my model is I don't have any social media. I don't have a website. I'm nowhere to be found, and you have to know someone through me, or I get introduced to people by really awesome industry colleagues that are also friends. So myself, I define that boundary when I'm working with someone who's a friend or being introduced to someone through a friend. If it's a business setting, then I'm very professional in it, and then I can have my friendship with that person in a different context. So when it's business, it's true, authentic business, and I try not to let lines blur. So all of my clientele is referred to me. And what I've realized is, whereas a lot of people dedicate a lot of energy to specific ways of building their awareness, rather than do it through something like social media or an online platform, I invested that energy into relationships and meeting people who I would say do the same thing that I do as a concept with a different specialty. So I have someone like you, I would say, is the same kind of person you've gone all in with exercise and muscle system stuff. There's very few of you. So I instantly have a respect and an understanding of what it's taken to you to get here. So there's this wordless, I know you know me, because we've walked similar paths just on a separate trail. Yeah. I find those people, you create a network of those people, and then you're always there to help each other, because sometimes you have a scenario where it's I just got to ask, I got this one client who's got this knee thing. I got to ask Brandon what his opinion of it would be. And then that often translates into this trust, and that trust translates into introductions. And then when you get the opportunity, you have to nail it. Because one thing I do for work is I do a lot of lectures and consulting for different companies. So every month I have 3 or 4 lectures that I have to do to all these doctors in the US. Because of COVID, they're all Zoom calls with no interactions. So I'm doing these hour-long performances, and I have to nail every one. Every introduction I get, I have one opportunity to make a first impression. So this level of self-trust I've built is what's allowed me to come across and be that kind of, authoritative professional that this person was hoping that they would be meeting.
Right.
And then from there, it's really dedicating as much energy and time and effort to getting to understand that client, so I know how to support them with the service I provide. And I know that I'm the only one who kind of does what I do. So, not to say that I'm anything special, but it's nice to have lack of competition in a certain way. So once the person understands what you do, your clients are never going to go anywhere else, because they can't find what it is you do in other people. So when I used to teach at school, I used to tell my students, number one, they'd always say, what do I have to know for the test? I'm like, guys, the question should be, what do you have to know for life? So it's do the things that no one else can do so you can, do the things that no one else will do so you can do the things that no one else can do. And that's kind of the ethos of what it is I've done to build my business. And then once you're in that echelon of people, you get these opportunities, you build a greater network, you deliver a great service, you develop a great reputation. And if you kind of trust it, it seems to take care of itself. So that's how I built my business.
Awesome. And there's a lot of great gems in there, so please go back and listen. We've all talked on this podcast about professional relationships. Roland, you touched on that in a big way of trying to find people of lateral mindset in academia, really people who are just equally as invested. So when people meet you, do you have a sales process? I know you have an assessment process, but it's different than most fitness people. And then the real thing I'm mostly interested, to be quite honest, is how do you go about retention and long-term relationships? Because I do know that you've had some of these relationships for a long period of time, and I'm wondering what retention conversation or hints you could pass along that people could take from this little fitness market.
So the first question was a process. How I typically do it is the initial call is I'm actually thinking about the process. You can see how well defined it is. I have a steps process kind of as a way of explaining what it is I do. But to be quite honest with you, I have an initial phone call with someone, and I see if I'm a good fit for them, but I also take that time to see if they're a good fit for me. There's some people I just don't want to work with because I just don't want that. I can't build a therapeutic client relationship with them in the same way that I may want, or maybe they're just not ready for what it is I do. So I'll just kind of push that off. But generally speaking, it's an introductory phone call. And then I make a point of doing almost a 2-hour initial client session. Because if they had recurrent dental infections at the age of 14, that matters to me because of what that clue tells me about what may be their biggest problem right now. Or if they had anything that is a scenario of their past that they may not be relevant, which the medical system in Canada does nothing to discern that, I want to know all of it. Because it also lets me know who that person is. What have they dealt with? What are their likes, dislikes? I go through this entire series of categories of asking them questions, but I just let them talk and I just take notes. And then from there, I set the expectations. I generally say I can't work with anyone for less than 6 months, because if I'm trying to change physiology, can't do it in a day.
Yep.
Especially if someone's like 50 years old. It's taken them 50 years to get here. So if we're going to be moving in the right direction, I'll know in the first 3 to 6 months that we're making some progress. And after then, I always have them reevaluate. The ones who want you to be part of their team, that's kind of, I'm working with some people, they have a coach here, they have a coach there. You become part of the team, so it's like you're there until you don't want to be or they don't want you to be.
Right.
And there are some people where I know that I'm only there to work with them for a short period of time because I don't have anything to give them after they've attained their goal unless they want me to be there. And I also get bored if it's just like a simple thing. So it's like, cool, you check in with me when you want. But generally speaking, my goal is to have 10 to 15 really ideal archetypal clients. And then it gives me free time to do some fun consulting gigs on the side or just have some free time to myself so I'm not working all the time.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
My process is a little informal. It's more, it's me and them, and how do we find that connection point to where no matter what the scenario is, we can always find a way to address something if something comes up, or we can always find a way to understand how we're moving forwards as a team.
Do you find yourself when you're working with these people that you have discovered in the beginning of talking to them their fundamental objective of why they're working with you? Mm-hmm. Or, and this sounds weird because I could imagine it coming from your world, it's harder for me, but for you might be easier, where you've actually discovered something that's a big glaring problem that becomes the focus of the relationship. When you're having conversations session after session, maybe you talk to someone once a month, once every few weeks, years later, how often do you find yourself referencing the original conversation, the original pain points that drove you people to the relationship?
You know, that's a good question. I would say the only time that becomes a challenge is, let's say their intended desire is contingent upon something I've discovered along the way. So let's say they want to get to a certain place in their body composition, their physical performance, their energy.
Yeah.
But their health is their limiting factor, but they're thinking it's just a diet and exercise thing. What I have to do is find this perfect balance of, I'm going to give you what you want, because that's what you're paying me for, and that's where you're emotionally tied to, but I need to explain to you and educate you, that unless we do this reality that you want is impossible. So that's when I have to reference the original thing, because it's like, look, you want to do this is what you want. You need to give me a little bit of what I want right now, not because I think it's more important, because I'll teach you the bridge to how these two things are mutually exclusive or interdependent.
Interesting.
That's how I would say that. But oftentimes it's kind of interesting you ask that question. When you and someone have this like really cool energy about the two of you as a relationship dynamic, as a client, after a while it's more about just furthering that, and it's like you kind of feed off of each other because you're chasing these goals together, and it's just a really exciting process.
Yeah, no, the relationship, like I call it the rapport continuum. Like over time, there's just a hyperbolic curve that just it becomes a weird part of your family in a different way.
It's true.
Yeah,
because humans are so wanting to belong to something. So many people are wanting to have that trust dynamic in their lives, and people want to be seen for who they are. And I think a big part of what everyone I work with gets to experience, and it's not because of me, it's their own journey, is they uncover more of who they are in this process because they're changing. They're making the commitment to change.
yeah.
So a huge part of it is managing that aspect of understanding who they are and where they want to go. And it's being mindful of being present in their process so you can grow with them at the same time. And that's a huge thing when it comes to client management. Think about how many clients who came to see you 3-4 years ago, like, are they at all the same person as they were 3-4 years ago?
They're evolving.
And thus, so are you, by virtue of like an action-reaction kind of thing. So I think that's an important thing when it comes to managing people, regardless of what echelon of professional. Like every human deserves to be themselves in that way. And it's like, how can you help someone feel comfortable and accepted and safe enough to uncover who they are in this process.
You know, and that we've talked about the echelon thing. I'll be quite honest, for this conversation and people listening to this, I keep bringing that up because it gets people excited and they kind of listen a little closer, but it really doesn't effing matter. Like, it doesn't, because I'll tell you, I don't even know how I would classify this, but my richest guy and my least rich person, whatever, like the person who's got the most status and least status, there's a lot of personality similarities. Like, the only difference is, I would say, is like how much wear they've gone through and how hard they've pushed. And I got hockey guys I see now, like retired NHL guys, one guy specifically, and I've worked with young kids, and I mean, they're still humans.
Everyone is, at the end of the day. Everyone has their insecurities. Everyone has their fears, their doubts, their things, and they also have their egos, their personality traits, their ways of operating. It kind of ties back to the very first part of this conversation. Once you have enough knowledge to be proficient with anyone, keep developing that. Never stop reading, never stop educating yourself. But the more you want to become a successful client practitioner, it really becomes more about knowing how to deal with people and understand who those people are.
And I would almost extend that outside of like service providing, but just like, just business and life in general.
Yeah.
I think one thing, like I would say to anyone that's listening to this, like if I recap what you've shared just about you, and I don't normally do that, but you have an almost unreproducible model. Like, no one could really listen to this and go, I'm going to go to that school, I'm going to go teach, I'm going to go meet Ben, I'm going to go.
Well, they could, but it would result in a different reality.
For sure. But what you've done through the process is you've acquired, and this is what I would say, like, you put a lot of time acquiring different skill sets that no one else has to make yourself indispensable in people's lives. And those skill sets, if you decided tomorrow to bail on all of the health stuff that you've learned, the communication and the stuff you've learned about people and the relationships you've built, and I would say the same for myself, but maybe not to the same extent. If I was like, I'm done with exercise, you could take the skills that you've learned at all with humans and you could go on and do something else in another company much faster than many other people would. And I'm not saying that you're going to do that, but I think why I bring that up is because it's really neat that you've invested so much energy and become an expert in one direction. And people see that even if you're not teaching that going that direction anymore, what it takes to get there is remarkable.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a beautiful a summary of how you just put it. It's if you kind of look at life like a video game, and then I use that example to be honest, a little, life, health, and time are kind of your attributes. So, what do you want to spend your time doing, and how can you then uncover the cheat codes? Because everyone remembers, playing Super Mario with the cheat codes. You can just get all the Mario Kart, get all the red shells or the blue shells, take everyone else out. But, that metaphor is to basically say that whatever you pick for a profession, regardless of the profession, if you understand how it's all constructed and if you understand people intrinsically well, success becomes a lot easier.
Yeah.
And it's, oftentimes the people with the PhDs, I'd love to employ those people because they're so hyper-focused in one area of expertise, but that also makes you a little bit blind to having a more expansive perspective of life. So yeah, well said. Thank you.
No, I get it for sure. There's something really beautiful about going all in and work, and that's what I really respect about you. Is you've done such an incredible job with that.
So just refusing to do anything else. Like I told myself a long time ago, I never don't want to do what I enjoy. I refuse to accept mediocrity as I define it. And if I see something that's interesting, I just kind of believe that I can do it. Like maybe I'm missing a part of my brain that's like, oh, you should think about caution. And what if it doesn't work? I'm like, I'm just going to go for it. And if it doesn't work, guess what? I'll do something else. Like that's really the simplistic nature of it. It's like, I'm going to do what's interesting until I'm bored of it. And then I'm going to do something else.
I think like the thing that stands out the most from today's conversation is that like what you've taken and how you've connected to the people. I mean, you've taken a world of information that is hard to get your head around, and most people wouldn't understand it. And if you explained it to me, I don't think I'm a terribly dumb person. I would have a hard time getting it at first, and it would take me a while to even get to where I even understood what you do. But you figured out how to convey it to people, and people can hear you. And I think being heard is probably the most important thing. Like on this, I talk about with marketing being seen, but you're not seen, you're heard. And then once you're heard, you've been able to be you're heard. Once people hear you, you're able to grow. And I love it. It's cool.
Thank you. And the last thing I would say is this process for anyone, I think it's really easy to go all in on it and then forget about the balance point. And I think now one reason I can do this is I do take a lot more time for myself to not work as much and not feel like I'm getting stressed out about not being productive, not accomplishing something, because it gives you your time of when you are focused. It's a lot more productive and you have a lot more energy to expend. Because there's yin and yang is a cliche concept, but it needs to be thought about in the context of building your business, where most of the people I see have built themselves up and sacrificed everything to do with their health and well-being and their lifestyle to get there. So they're taking all this money and they're trying to reverse engineer and getting it back on the back end when your physiology is older and slower and more in a stage of decline. If you can bring that into your awareness as you build the process and do it a little bit more mindfully by being in the moment and being present and not being gripped by fear, because again, it's all just concepts, that really has helped me. I hope it helps anyone who may be listening to this.
Cool, man. This has been a lot of fun. I mean, if there was one last nugget of information of something you wanted to share to this audience that's on the forefront of your mind, what would it be?
I would say at the end of the day, the most important thing is figuring out who authentically you are, what your style is, and what you enjoy. Because trying to be anyone else will always leave you feeling a little bit let down. Trying to do something someone else's way was their process, it wasn't yours. If you don't believe in yourself, if you don't believe it's possible, and you don't do what you enjoy, nothing will top that. So be authentically in that trust, and it's not an overnight process.
You said something earlier, and then you said that again there. And the number of folks I know that have observed someone else's behaviors in whatever context that may mean, and they've tried to just replicate the behaviors to help get to that level of success. You and I have, as we were growing to go to where we were going, had no idea what the F we were doing to get there.
No.
And I mean, like you're like, okay, I'm going to make it. And you're like, well, I've never made it, so I don't know how to make it.
When am I there? Tell me someone, please.
Right? I don't know what that means to get there. And so we find mentors and people, and they go, oh, this is how you get there faster. And that's been really, really great. But then other people look at the things you do now, right? They see you in the jungle, relaxing and working. And they're like, oh, so to be a successful person, I have to not be on social media. I have to go to the jungle, and I got to do all these things. And it's hard to even fathom, like, that's the process you went through, and that's where you are now. And it's like, you don't do the same thing for a black belt that you do for a yellow belt.
Correct. It's like, maybe it can be said like this as well. I've never looked at someone and wanted to be them or wanted their life. But if I'm wanting to be there in the jungle and replicate that person's life, I'm wanting what that person has in that moment. I didn't do this so I could be with the goal of being in the jungle. That's just evolved over the way my life has evolved from a profession where I can work anywhere I want. It's an important thing to understand that, don't look at someone else's style, because it's like, you ever made a recipe that's like a family recipe and it tastes differently from how your mom used to make it? Yeah. Why is that? When you follow the exact same process, it tastes different. It's the same reason that whoever has built their business being true to their style, it's worked for them because that's the secret ingredient. It is you. It is the magic that you bring as an individual. What is it? They say emulation is the highest form of flattery or something, or you're doing someone else's thing. Like, no one can ever be a better George Costanza by doing a George Costanza impersonation.
No, 100%.
I mean, he's been typecasted. I just tried to think of one guy who's never had a job other than the one epic character. But it's really what it is. It's like, don't copy someone else's process. Get inspiration from, maybe look at some things that they've enjoyed. Like, you and I have both used, say, Tom Purvis and Peter as an inspiration for how we present or how we communicate. But their style is their style.
You know what? It's funny you said, like, for me, I did want to be somebody. I was like, I want to do what Peter does. I know how much money he makes per hour. He's got a motorcycle. He works out. He's bodybuilding. Like, I want to be this guy. And I was quite young when I first met him. Like, I met him when I was like 19, I think.
One facial hair.
No, I mean, I don't have facial hair that's a long story. But there was a point though, and you kind of said it, like, for me, where it was like, there is actually no one on planet Earth that I want to be. I actually really like who I am. And
I like you too.
Thank you. I like you too.
There we go.
And I just want to do more of what I do. And I think it's really kind of been the process of just that. It's been figuring out, like, where am I going, what do I like to do, and just being authentic.
Who do I want to be? And then knowing it can all change at some other point and being cool with that, right? It's like, this is what they don't teach you in a lot of business things. They give you the framework and the understanding, and this is the process, this is how you 10x it. It's like, don't forget about you in the process, because that will get you there. It just might be a little bit slower, but it's going to last.
Roland, I think this is a great place to put a pin in today.
Cool.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Anyone who's listening to this or watching this in the future, you cannot find Roland anywhere. I can't recommend an Instagram page or a website.
Through Brandon, you can.
If you have any questions or you want to talk to Roland, send me a note and I will connect you with him, and he will choose to or not respond to you depending on
You
where
have
he's
been
at.
decreed accepted.
Yes or no, if he finds this valuable. But man, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Been a long time coming, and I'm excited to have you here.
Finally, we got to do this live.
Everyone, thanks so much for listening. Fitness Pro Mentors Podcast. Please share this if you found this valuable. And Roland wants to be heard. So if you know anyone that could benefit from hearing what he's saying, please share this episode. Hope you have a wonderful one, and see you real soon.
Adios.